Back in the early 90s, when I was about 10 years old, I had a really creepy close encounter with someone that honestly could have ended a lot worse than it did. And if I had been a bit more gullible, it likely would have ended really badly. At the time, I honestly did not comprehend the potential danger of the situation. But as I've gotten older, it clicked pretty hard how unsettling this experience really was. As mentioned, this was back when I was about 10 years old. My parents both worked during the day, and most days when I got home from school, I would be in an empty house for a few hours until my mum was able to leave work and get home. They trusted me to be responsible enough to take care of myself. I was the type of kid that liked to just spend time in my room playing my Super Nintendo, rather than being a problem for other people. We lived in a neighborhood that was pretty much just a bunch of old people, so it was relatively safe. So honestly, it never seemed like a big deal. On this day, I'd been home for maybe half an hour. I'd finished my homework and turned on the TV to watch something, and had grabbed a Pop-Tart for a snack, when I thought I saw something outside of the living room window. It was a pretty big window, and it faced to the west, so if you walked by it in the afternoon, it would cause a bit of a shadow in the room. I glanced over for a moment to see if I could see anything. I saw a man, probably in his late 40s, as he looked older than my dad, slowly walking along the sidewalk in front of our house. He seemed to be studying the house, staring at the ground, the roof, almost like he was seriously trying to memorize how the house looked. Then it got creepy. As I was watching this guy analyze the exterior of our home, I watched as he put his face up to the glass, with his hand cupped around his eyes. He was absolutely looking in the window and trying to see if there was anyone in the house. And, of course, he saw me sitting on the couch just staring at him. He smiled and waved, and then I watched as he walked over to the front door, put his hand on the doorknob, and tried to push the door open. Thankfully, my parents had told me to keep the door locked at all times, and I was pretty obsessive with doing so he wasn't able to get in. When he realized that he wasn't getting the door open, he walked back to the window and started knocking. By this point, I was having a mini panic attack in my mind, screaming about how this was some weirdo trying to get into the house, but I kept trying to calm down and tell myself he must have just been a neighbor or something. He kept knocking on the window rapidly, just tapping on it with his knuckle for a few moments, and then he started on the door really hard. At this point, I had no idea what to do, so I walked into the kitchen near the front door and just stood there. Because I was so unsure of what to do, I just figured I could tell him he got the wrong house and to go away. I didn't open the door, obviously, but I did shout out to him saying, "Who are you and what do you want?" When I asked this, I could hear him laugh a bit, and then say,
"Could you open the door for me?"
I said no, and again asked who he was. He then said he was a neighbor, and he wasn't going to hurt me. I may have only been 10, but I knew this was a weird thing to say to a kid. You don't just tell a kid I'm not going to hurt you, unless you plan to hurt them. At least not in this kind of scenario. I told him that, if he was a neighbor, then he needed to come back later when my parents were home, which I now realize was a stupid thing to say, as this was me literally telling him that my parents weren't home. When I said this, he paused for a moment and said,
"Look, I work with, my mom's name redacted. I'm a friend of hers. She'll vouch for me. Can you please let me in?"
Now this is where things got a bit confusing for me. This man knew my mother's name specifically, and it's not a common name, so it wasn't like he could just guess a game and get it right. But I also knew my mother's co-workers. My mom worked at a hair salon, and she was one of the big names of the store, alongside my aunt. They had about 5 employees that they worked with, and I knew all of them, because I would always hang out there during the summer, and I loved all Mom's co-workers. The thing is, all of her co-workers were either older women or younger ladies trying to break into the industry. This guy was neither of those. I mentioned that I didn't think I could let him in, and that he should come back later. At this point, he got pretty angry. He started banging on the door saying,
I know your mom. Her name is...
My mom's name redacted.
You need to let me in right now.
When he started getting aggressive, I ran over to the cordless phone and hit the button to call the salon. When they answered, I told her who I was and told her I need to talk to my mom right away. I explained the whole situation to her, and she told me to hang up, go to the laundry room and lock the door, and call the cops. She said she would be there in a few minutes. I did exactly what she said. I ran to the laundry room and locked the door, and then called 911, telling them that a guy was trying to break into my house. After about 10 minutes, I heard my mom yelling my name, along with the voice of an officer, and I came out to see them standing at the door and looking at a pile of glass. Apparently, after I had run down to the laundry room, this guy had smashed the window on the front door and tried to break in. The officers took my statement, asking me a bunch of questions about the guy and what he looked like. I told them all I could, and told them they knew my mom's name specifically. And they said they would drive around to try and find the guy, but I have no idea if they ever caught them. My mom thanked them, and after all was said and done, she told me I did everything right, and kept telling me that it was all okay. I could tell she was freaking out about as bad as I was. After that, I wasn't allowed to be home alone for a few years. My mom worked with one of our neighbors, an older lady who was actually one of the lunch ladies at my school, and I stayed at her house until they got home every day until I was in high school. She was pretty cool though, and she always had food for me when I got there, so I didn't mind. That day is something that has been burned in my mind, and when I was that age, I was definitely scared, but as I mentioned, I now realize how serious it actually was. I'm thankful that, even at that age, I was smart enough to realize that this guy didn't want anything good. And I have no idea how he knew my mum's name specifically. Maybe he looked at the mail or something. I'm just glad that I trusted my instincts, and that I was able to avoid a much worse fate. I've been a long time listener to podcasts where people have told their scary stories, or told about creepy encounters and whatnot, but I never personally expected to have one of my own. Now that I do have one, I figured why not share it with the world and see if maybe it can be used as a lesson to others and help people avoid similar events. If nothing else, at least it can be considered entertainment to some. I live in a small town that I like to think is pretty safe. There really aren't many crimes that I hear about around town, and I've never met anyone I felt threatened by around town. I've been without a car for a while, and I just walk from my house to a nearby bus stop to get to work, and then do the same thing to get home. The bus stop to get home is a bit annoying, because they don't stop at the same spot where they pick me up in the morning. So, I end up having to walk about 25-ish minutes from the second stop to my apartment complex. It's a bit annoying, sure, but it is what it is. And since I don't have a car, it's all I have to rely on most of the time. Now, This whole event happened a few weeks ago. It was a normal day at work. I was super busy, and by the end of the day, I was seriously exhausted. I got to my stop, got on the bus, and was sitting in the seat, just kind of dozing off a bit, while making sure I didn't actually fall asleep. Something I've got pretty good at over the couple years I've done this routine. After a bit of just sitting there, and being rocked back and forth by the jostling of the bus, we hit a pothole, and the bump of it actually pulled me completely out of my half-asleep state. I shook my head and kind of looked around. And when I did, I noticed there was a guy a few seats ahead of me that was sitting with his back to the side of the wall of the bus, and he was staring at me. I don't mean like sly, maybe he has a crush on me type staring. I mean full on glaring, like I stole his wallet and kicked his dog and he knew it was me kind of staring. I had no idea who this guy was. I'd never seen him on this bus route before, and I was a bit creeped out. So I just kind of thought, I'll ignore it the best I can, and that'll be it. He's just kind of creepy. The entire ride to my stop, he just sat there, staring at me with the same wide-eyed stare. It got to the point where I thought maybe he was blind, and he wasn't actually staring at me, and maybe I was being insensitive. It was such an awkward situation, and I really was trying to rationalize or think about it in any logical or even illogical way that I could. After a while, we were approaching my stop, and I was a bit hesitant to get off, but I wasn't about to make my 20-something minute walk turn into a 40 or more minute walk just because of this guy. As we approached, I got up and walked towards the exit of the bus. And as I passed this guy, he definitely turned his head to watch me. And much to my misfortune, as I got past his seat, he stood up and started following me. I had no idea what to do. I had already shown that this was my stop by getting up, and there weren't a lot of people on the bus. So it wasn't like I was going to be able to get anyone to help me. I decided that I could maybe mention something to the driver, and they could help me, or stop this guy from getting off the bus with me, because I was creeped out. I really was at a loss of what could be done, because technically, him being a creep wasn't a crime. The second I turned to make a comment to the driver, this guy grabbed my shirt and pushed me toward the door, and, I'm not exaggerating, he practically threw me off the bus. He grabbed me and shoved me with all his strength out the doors and onto the curb. I was lucky I was able to halfway catch myself, and that I didn't smack my head on the bus stop sign or the bench or anything. As I fell, this guy seriously pointed at me and said, "If I ever catch you on this bus again, I'll kill you." This was, obviously, terrifying, and it caused a lot of chaos to ensue, mostly from the driver. He was yelling at the guy. The couple other people that were on the bus were standing up and approaching this man who had just threatened me. And I was just sitting there, terrified for my life. As soon as the other people got to the guy, he jumped off the bus and took off at a full sprint. Within moments, he was gone, and they were helping me up, and the driver told me to get back on the bus while he called the cops to escort me home. I was thankful that he let me back on to wait, and that he was willing to call into dispatch that there was an incident, so I wasn't there alone. The cops did come. They asked for a description, asked me if I knew the guy, and I told them the full thing, that he was just staring at me, creepily. And then when I went to get off the bus, he shoved me and threatened me. They didn't seem to want to believe that I didn't know the dude, but I assured them that I'd never seen him before in my life. They took all the info from everyone, and then one of the officers actually did give me a ride home. Thankfully, that's pretty much the end of it. They haven't contacted me to let me know that there's been any progress, and my guess is that there won't be, because it was such a random incident, and beyond a description, I don't know if they had anything else on the guy. It definitely scared the hell out of me, and it's actually made me a bit nervous to ride the bus again, just in case he makes good on his threat. But I'm hopeful that it was just a one-off incident, and that I never run into that crazy dude, ever again. This actually happened a few years back when I was in college, so it would have been around 2018. Back then, I was a very social person. I liked to hang out in large gatherings, go out to events, etc. You get the idea. That year was actually the last year I went to house parties, partially because of COVID, mostly because of this event. I had gone to a house party that was hosted by a really good friend of mine, Wayne. Wayne is a weird guy. He likes parties, but he's also kind of stiff. He wasn't the type to throw wild bashes. He was the one that planned out a gathering, made sure everyone knew that the closing time was 10:30 p.m. and kept things within what the law said was okay. The plan of this party was that it would be a small to medium get-together. No more than 20 or so people throughout the house and yard. Just people we both knew well. But as the count went on, I noticed that the count of people was definitely more than 20. I leaned over to Wayne at one point and asked if he had invited more people than he told me, and he took a look around the party and gave a bit of a scowl. He hadn't. He mentioned there was a group of guys that he didn't know that showed up a while ago, and that he just hadn't had the chance to talk with them because he'd been talking with everyone else. I patted him on the shoulder and mentioned that I would go talk to them if he wanted, and he said he would really appreciate that. I walked up to the small group that was standing off to the side, just chatting amongst themselves, and lifted a hand as sort of a wave in a friendly way. I'm the diplomatic type. I tried to keep the conversation light and casual, assuming that maybe these guys just didn't know they weren't supposed to be there. I didn't want to make a scene or be rude. They could be good guys. I asked one of the guys how he knew about the party, and he mentioned a mutual acquaintance of Wayne and I, a guy named Jason. I nodded, asked if Jason had told them about it, and they sort of shrugged it off and said that they were friends of his. And that's where the conversation tapered off. With that information, I went back to Wayne to let him know. Upon hearing the name, Wayne's expression changed to one of annoyance. He said that Jason had actually done this before, and that he was going to have a talk with him. Jason was actually a co-worker of Wayne's, so Wayne definitely treated him with kid gloves when it came to these things, because he didn't want to have any sort of bad blood with someone he worked with. But I could tell that this was a breaking point. Wayne asked me to come with him, just in case, and I agreed. As we walked toward the backyard, I noticed that the group of unfamiliar guys was headed in the same direction, just ahead of us, which made me feel uneasy for some reason. We got outside just in time to witness the horrifying scene. That group of guys that had jumped Jason, they were relentless as they beat him senseless, punching him, kicking him, beating him harder and harder. It was a quick but intense assault, and after just a few seconds of chaos, they stopped. One of them leaned over Jason, who was completely motionless, and yelled,
Consider this a warning. Next time will be your last.
Then, in a show of audacity that still haunts me, the group walked calmly through the party, out the front door, and all got in the car and drove off. They didn't rush, they didn't glance back, they didn't do a damn thing to hide who they were. They walked as if they owned the place. as if they were untouchable. In the aftermath, 911 was called and an ambulance arrived to tend to Jason, who I honestly assumed was dead. Thankfully, he wasn't. Despite the attack, Jason refused to identify his attackers. He claimed he had no idea who they were and had never met them. It was pretty clear he was covering for them, for whatever reason. Nothing came of this event, at least to the best of my knowledge. They were never identified, and I haven't seen any of them since then. As for Jason, I haven't really seen him either. This was also the last time Wayne had a house party, which is completely understandable. We can all speculate what the hell this was, but it was pretty clear that Jason has upset someone he shouldn't have. And I think it's best we all just left it at that. This story is mine, sort of, but it's more my dad's, so the entire thing is based on what he's told me. I was there. I was just strapped to my little car seat in the back, and I was obviously way too young to remember any of it. He told me about this later in life, and honestly, it was terrifying. It's probably why my dad was always so protective of me and emphasized being alert and aware of your surroundings. Hell, when I turned 17 and got my license, he always told me to take the main road and avoid the back roads. From what my dad had told me, it was a pretty normal morning. He needed to go run some errands, so he was taking me to my grandma's house. I was just sitting in my car seat and watching the back window as I always did, completely unaware of anything. He was driving down a relatively quiet road with trees on both sides. My grandma lived on the edge of a suburb, so there were a few spots you had to go through that weren't heavily incorporated. He was there, just cruising at speed, when a man jumped out of the woods and ran in front of my dad's car, flailing his arms wildly. Naturally, my dad slammed his brakes, barely avoiding hitting this guy. He said that he could see that this guy looked terrified, like he was running from something or someone. But something about it didn't seem right. Something about the situation was off. His instincts were screaming at him that this guy wasn't just some dude running across the road. The guy didn't say anything to my dad. He just limped over to the side of the car and made a motion of rolling down the window. My dad, curious as to what this guy's explanation was, cracked the window and asked if he was okay. The man didn't respond. The two of them just stared at each other, eye to eye, for several silent seconds. My dad said his heart was pounding, like his mind was saying, "Nah, get out of there." He was prepared to drive off at the first sign of trouble. And sure enough, trouble arrived. As soon as he turned back to look at the road, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the two other figures starting to emerge from the undergrowth of the woods on either side. Without hesitation, my dad stomped on the gas and the car lurched forward, leaving the three strangers standing there in the middle of the dust cloud he kicked up. He said that he could see them in the rear view, and all three of them just stood there, watching as he drove off. He didn't stop driving until he reached my grandma's house, where he said that he called the cops to report the incident. He wasn't sure what they were planning, but he gave them a description of the men and the location, but the details were sparse outside of that. We never did find out what happened with the situation, or what that all was. The police never called us back with any details, and my dad didn't press the issue. He was just happy to have avoided what was undoubtedly heading towards a dangerous situation. Even today, years later, my dad sweats every time he tells the story, which really tells me how much it scared him. My dad is a good guy. He'll stop and help people on the side of the road. But this was definitely a sobering reminder that some people will take advantage of those willing to stop. It's important to trust your instincts and be hypervigilant about your surroundings. A few years ago, I used to live in an apartment complex that was attached to a really nice public park, one that was surrounded entirely with a walking path that broke away at one part to go into a wooded area. I've walked this park hundreds of times, like literally hundreds of times. I used to walk that park every single day after work for a couple of years. It was one of the safest places I've ever walked, and honestly, I never expected anything to happen to me while I walked it. But the day that this happened, my illusion of how safe it was definitely shattered. I was about halfway through my usual route, which included about half of the branch path that took me out into the forest. I didn't like to do the whole thing because it went too far out for me, but I would go until I reached the benches, which would be the halfway mark, and then turn around to head home. I was minding my own business when I started to get this weird feeling, like something was watching or following me. You know, that creepy, crawly sensation that just makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. I tried to shake it off, thinking I was just a bit anxious, or that maybe there was a person there that was just there walking. After a few minutes, I started to feel a bit worse. I was thinking that I was just being paranoid, until I turned around and saw that there was a guy that was standing on the side of the path, looking around like he had lost something, but then every few moments would glance up in my direction. He was a bit overweight, wearing a white and green tracksuit. I slowed down as I walked and half turned to look at the guy and make sure he knew I saw him. As soon as I did, this guy stopped looking at the ground and stood up and gave a small wave and said, "Oh, hey." I didn't reply. I just stood there and gave a small wave back. As soon as I did, he nodded and laughed, and then started stepping towards me at an escalated pace. My instincts kicked in, and I took off down the path, starting at a medium run. But when I looked back and saw that this guy was now chasing me as fast as he could, I took off at a full sprint. For a few moments, this guy was running at me, and I was running away. Thankfully, I was definitely much faster than he was. As I was able to get back to the part of the path that branched off, I ducked down into some of the thicker bushes, hiding and seeing if this man was going to follow me this far. After a couple more seconds, he actually did run down to the split, and he slowed down to a walk as he caught his breath and looked around. I just sat there, ducked down into these bushes, feeling my heart pound so hard that I thought I might throw up, watching this guy look around the path, when I heard something that completely confirmed all my fears. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, pressed the button on the screen, and started talking. I couldn't make out the full conversation, but I heard enough to know that this situation was as terrifying as I thought it was. "Hey, yeah, I lost her." His voice was frustrated and angry. And I knew for a fact that, had I not gotten away from this guy, bad things would have happened. After a few more words, he hung up and yelled, swearing out into the woods, and then slowly walked back the way he had came. I stayed hidden in those bushes for a while, until it clicked in my mind that I should probably call 911. I pulled out my phone and I dialed it, and explained to them that there was a guy on the walking path that had been chasing me, and explained what he had said on the phone. The woman said they would send some police out to the park, and to meet them there if possible. I got out of the hiding spot when I was certain that he was, in fact, gone, and walked back toward my building. I waited in the parking lot of the property for a while, and, in an incredibly disappointing twist, the police never showed up. My guess is they got a call that was more important, but I would have at least liked a call back or something. But, of course, that didn't happen. The whole thing really messed me up, and I never walked back to that park. I ended up taking my walks around the parking lot of my apartment complex, because I couldn't bring myself to go back into those woods, just in case. It's scary to think about what might have happened if he had have gotten a hold of me. But thankfully, that didn't happen. I have no idea what happened, and honestly, I hope that no one ever ended up in the situation I did. And I hope I never run into him ever again. And to everyone else, be careful and stay aware, because you never know who might be watching. I hope you enjoy this story. What did you think of it? Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Don't forget to stab the like button, subscribe, hit the bell and leave a comment. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreon subscribers and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. Don't forget to check out my social media accounts below, including my merch. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.